Good Tavach. This is Gemara in Chagigah, Daf Yod Aleph, and today's shir has been generously sponsored by a close friend of myself on the Daf. L'zecher Nishmas is Bobby Frima Bas Golda on her yard site, which is going to be the day of today's Daf Yutes Adar Aleph. And Mir Hashem, the learning the entire Chabura should bring the Neshama Frima Bas Golda to a higher and higher place, and in Gan Eden Shalbayla, as the Schos of Taira should elevate her Neshama to incredible places in Gan Eden. As well as all learning Shvias Choshidah for Yisachayim the Rosh remember as he's good to translate to Shan Makal and Rosh Hashem to Skito Hashem to Shem and the Vizavo and Tell Shem and Chaya, as well as Chos for Rosh Hashem before Shmuel Yos and Reved and Reved Chaim Research some soon raise the service Kanendol Ita Bas Yon Vas Chayis Lev Sofim and the Lev of Hertz and who's the Shalei Shom as Nomi which Aviku Shel Chad Shmo in Chandrizm Chayim Asmina Adi Neina Bashin Mintas Viv Hegdur Rivkos the Shem Zazmin Chaz Amr and Yakotar Baskil Shem Zech when it's Yudis for Lavram Rechlazaya Shimshon ben Chanav Gal Perabas Esther Miriam Gabriela Bas Luma Yisrael Yitzchak ben Dina Recham Yitzchak Miriam Bas Tzil Bracha B'Sai Shar Choli Yisrael. We're holding in the bottom of Yod Amid Beis, in the middle of a bit of a lengthy discussion into Me'ilah, as the Mishnah had different categorizations as to items that were explicit, less explicit, and most explicit within the psukim of the Torah, and therefore trying to learn out. One was Me'ilah was Teluyim B'Saira. They were just hanging by a hair, and the Gemara was bothered, and we'll just do a bit of a recap from the two dots at the bottom of Yudam and Beis. The Gemara was bothered that we find psukim about the dinam of Me'ilah. So why are you telling me that it's totally B'Saira, that it's not sourced? So answer number one was the case of a shliach, and this is Rami Bar Chama's answer, is that if you own has an item that is Kedusha, as Kaddish, part of the Beis HaMikdash, and he gives it to a shliach, and the shliach gives him money, for example, to buy him an item, and the shliach goes, what's the halacha? The Baal Bayis is one that does the Aveira. Shluchei shel Adam kama Haisai. Whereas if the shliach does not do exactly as the Baal Bayis tells him, but rather he does it slightly different, then the shliach is over. And the obvious kasha with that was, how could it be? How could one person do an aveira and someone else be over? The shliach does something wrong, and I, the Baal Bayis, it's true I sent him, but the classic example, what? I told you jump off a roof, you're going to jump? We know, ein shliach l'dvar aveira. V'chizeh choyte v'zeh mischayev. That's the chiddush. And that's the kihara natzli mesayra, the mountain hanging by hair. It's very difficult to understand. That's the chiddush of Me'ilah. Came along Rava, and Rava said, what's the problem? We have a precedent for such an entity from Truma, chet from Truma, in which we know, Shulcha shel Adam kamaisai. Elam Rava gives a new answer. This answer of Rava is critically important, because after all the steps that we're going to go through, we're going to come back to the din of Rava. So Elam Rava, let's read this together, about 10 lines to the bottom. First line is Amar loy nitzcha l'chletanya nizgar balabayis lo nizkar shliach. I have some cash. The cash was meiser sheni. The cash was money that's going to be some mikdash or something like that, and I by accident give it to the shliach to go buy me a new jacket for Yantif. And what happens? The shliach goes, and as he's traveling, I'm like, oh shoot, why did I give him that? That was Kedusha, I'm not allowed to use that. So if the Baal Bayis remembers, then the Shliach, of course, doesn't remember because he doesn't know anything giving. So I give him cash to go do something. The halacha is the Shliach is mal. A Chiddush, the Shliach doesn't know he's doing anything wrong. Yet the Shliach is over Me'ilah. The Shliach is misusing and abusing the item of the Beis HaMikdash. And on that, says the Gemara, how could that be? Shliach Anya Maikavid, a very powerful lashon. Shliach Anya, literally this poor shliach. What did he do wrong? He didn't do anything. I told him to do something. I gave him cash. He followed my direction. What could he have done anything differently? And on that, that is the chiddush of Me'ilah. And on this, says Rav Ashi as well, Rav Ashi, my kushya. What's so difficult? This is similar to halach of someone removes items that have Kedusha, money of Kedusha, and uses them for a chol, uses them for a secular purpose, and the halacha is that you're over Me'ilah. So what's the big chiddush? I gave the money to the shliach, and the shliach used money that had Kedusha for a mundane purpose. So says Rav Ashi, what's such a chiddush? Why is this a mountain being held by whatever? It's very, very It's very source. We've had such a precedent to this. Elam Rav Ashi rather comes to Rav Ashi, says Lo Nitzcha Ela L'Chazatan. Says Rav Ashi, I'll tell you the source. The following Mishnah. What's the Mishnah? Not 11 Kaira Shalaktish. Says Rav Ashi, what happens if someone takes a stone or a beam that belonged to Aktish Ariz Eloi Ma'al? What's halacha? There's no Me'ilah. Nasa L'Chaveiroi. So if I take an item of Aktish, no problem. If I give it to you, who Ma'al? V'Chaveiroi Lo Ma'al. Then the halacha is still I am Ma'al. And the friend is not Ma'al. So let's just get this straight. Very interesting. I picked up a beam that belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. I did nothing wrong. No Me'ilah. Me'ilah again means you misused, you abused the item of the Beis HaMikdash. I give it to you. Then what happens? Hu Ma'al v'chaver lo Ma'al. Now all of a sudden I am over after I give it to you, and you're not over. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. Michli, Mishkal Shakla, 3 lines at the bottom. I don't get it. Why? Let's figure out what's going on over here. Michli Shakla. You took the beam regardless. Maliu, Mali Chaveru. I don't understand, says the Gemara. This makes no sense. I pick it up, I'm not over. I give it to you, then I'm over, and not you. How does this make any sense? That's the Chiddush. That's this mountain hanging by a hair. Says the Gemara, no Chiddush. Shemai Kosha. What's so difficult? Shmuel. We have a precedent. Amar Shmuel says, Shmuel. Hacha begizbar ha-misayris lai avnei binyan askinan. What are we talking about over here? We're talking about the Gizbar, the person in charge of the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore the Chalheicha, the Mincha, Bershusei today, wherever that bean is considered mine, because I'm in charge of the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, B'shus Didei Mancha, that's the reason. Meaning, when I pick it up, I'm not over Me'ilah. Why not? I'm in charge of the Beis HaMikdash. I'm allowed to pick it up. When I give it to you, all of a sudden now I'm over. Because what I just do, I just took it out of the Rishus of the Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, I'm over and not you. So that's the Chiddush. So says the Gemara again. Says the Gemara again, we have a nice source. Ella miseifa. So again, we're looking for what is the case of Me'ilah. Where do we find the case that there is a Chiddush of Me'ilah that's not very source, and therefore it's going to be a mountain hanging by a hair? Rather, we learn it out from the Seifa. If you take that beam of the Beis HaMikdash and you build it, you knock it into the wall, what's the halacha? Loimal, there's no Me'ilah. Ad sheyidar tachteo, until you live underneath that beam, b'shaveh prutan. The Gemara says, why? That's very strange. Michli. Mali dar, mali loidar. Once you take the beam and you knock it into your wall, you build with the beam. So why is it only once you live under it that you are mile? Says the Gemara, that's the Chiddush. So continues the Gemara, and everyone knows the theme already. My gosh, what's the big deal? Rav teaches us that you put the beam on top of the skylight, and therefore you didn't actually attach it. So if you lived under it, that's the first time you're actually using this beam at this entity, because it was just sitting there. So we can't figure out what is the Chiddush of this din of Me'ilah. Ella, says the Gemara, go back. Go all the way back to the din of Rava. What was the din of Rava? The din is I have cash. I give it to you to go buy me that jacket for Yontif. And we said, I remember, shoot, that money has Kedusha. So the halacha is that I am not over, you are over. And we asked on that. Let's read it together. It was a Kakashalach. And we asked, that we have a precedent. Anytime you take money and you misuse it, money that has Kedusha, the answer is no, that's not a kasha. Hasam, in a case that you know in your wallet, you have $100 of the Beis HaMikdash. Made the yada, you know, dikazuzi the hektish, that you have money in your brishos, in your possession of hektish, you got to be careful with it. So that's the reason why even when you use it by mistake, it's a problem. Because you knew you had some money, you should have been more careful with it. But in our case, this is the chiddush, this is that mountain hanging by a hair. Miyada, did the shliach know anything? He's a shliach. I handed him the cash. He knew nothing. That is the case that we've been looking for, the mountain hanging by a hair. Absolutely beautiful. Continues the Gemara. Mikra muad v'alachis merubais. In these cases, there are a few psukim, a lot of halachas. Tanu learned in the Mishnah, Goyim v'halachas. The topics of the Goyim and halachas are mikra mu'at, are not a lot of psukim, halachas merubas, many halachas. Negoyim are mikra mu'at. Says the Gemara, what? Negoyim only are a few psukim? Negoyim mikra meruba. There's so many psukim about Negoyim. So Amar Papa, you're right. Switch around the rice. Achikamer Negoyim mikra meruba, v'halachas mu'atais. Oh, halachas are mikra mu'at, v'halachas meruba. So I have kamina. Says Mar Shkoyach. Who cares? There's a lot of psukim, not a lot of psukim. What's the practical difference? Explains the Gemara, beautiful. If you're not sure about a halacha negayim, where should you look? What sefer should you pull out of the shelf? Ayin bikra, look in the psukim. But if you misavka lacha milsa ba'ayalois, then don't look in psukim because it's not a lot of psukim. Rather ayin b'masnisan, and that's the difference between dinim ayalois and negayim. Dinim, what's next? Monetary laws. We said these have many scriptural real psukim. Mechti ksivan says Gemara. No, what do you mean? It sounds like it has a source in the Torah, but it's not explicit. Ask the Gemara, Mechti Ksivin, it's explicit, straight up sukkim in the Torah, dealing with monetary cases. Lo netzcha the Rabbi, the Tani Rabbi Omer. Nefesh tachas nefesh, it says in the case that two people are fighting, and one by accident hits a woman and causes her a miscarriage. What's the halacha? Nefesh tachas nefesh. Mammon ato mammon. What does that teach us? That teaches you have to pay money if one kills the fetus. Maman atoimer. Ask the atoimer, maman, excuse me. Oyenel nefesh, mamish. But maybe no, it refers to a case when you actually kill a person. You don't just kill the baby, you actually kill the mother. You get executed. So that's the chiddush over here, that in this case, there's only going to be monetary compensation. Again, I'm sorry, not that if you actually want to kill the mother. In the case where you kill the fetus, Havamina would have been maybe nefesh. You actually have to pay for the soul. Says the Gemara, no. Avkan mamoin. That the halacha is that there is a special chiddush over here, that you're able to pay only mamain. And this is the chiddush, that even though there are psukim, however, it's not explicit, and that's what we said, that there's mikra malei, but it's not explicit. And we continue with avodos. Says the Gemara, about 20 lines to the bottom, the two dots we're dealing with now, different karbanos that again have many psukim, but it's not explicit. Ask the Gemara, mechtak sivin, what do you mean it is explicit? Loi nitzcha elaloi leches adam, the carrying of the blood, the halacha, which we know we've learned back in Gemara and Yuma, the four critical avodas. One of them is the halacha, the carrying of the blood. Says the Gemara, that is something that's not explicit, but yet there are psukim. The Tani learned in a brayso vekrivu zu kabbalas adam va'avki rachmana b'loshen halacha. The kriva, the servicing, the bringing of the blood, is said in the words of halacha, of conveying. D'chsev v'hikra v'akayin is akol v'hikra. That's the carrying of the limbs. So the chiddush is that Allah is not excluded from the din of Kabbalah, of catching the blood. It is a critical one of the avodas. The kohen has to be standing, he has to be wearing his big day kahuna, etc. It is a proper avodah. Tahira is laws of Tahira. Mechtik Sivan asks, what do you mean? They're explicit. You know it's not explicit. The size of the mikvah, that's not explicit. Tanya learned in a brayso which we've seen many times. Rachas as besar b'mayim b'mei mikvah as kol besare. Then the pasuk continues, says you have to have your whole body in it. Mayim shekol gufa yalaban, that teaches us to be the quantity of water that a body could go fully immersed. V'kama hein amalama barum shalosh amas, 1 by 3 amas. V'shir chacham, how much is that? May mikvahs arba'im sa. So the law of the halacha of the source of 40 sa is not explicit, but rather it is source, but not explicit. And we continue 7 lines to the bottom of Timeos, the lacha of Tama. Mechtak Siva says Gemara, it's explicit. Lo nitzcha l'chdasha min asheretz. The size of conveying Tama, the size of a lentil bean from a sheretz, that is not explicit. The loik Siva, that is not explicit. Tanya, Bahem, it says the pasuk with regarding to Tama, that it conveys a Tama with them. Yachal bekulan, we would have have thought that any bit of Tumah is gives over. Mayhem from them. I would have thought bit miksasan that it has to be now part of the sheretz. So what is it? Is it a dot of the sheretz? Is it a part of the sheretz? Tamalemer bahem. Okay, that's what's his bahem mayhem seesaw. At Chagigah b'miksasa shuki kula. You have to have touched a part of the sheretz of the dead creature, which is the size of a full entity of Toma. How much is that? Shir chacham b'chladasha. That's the size of the lentil beam. Why? Shkein chaymet. Because there is a little creature called the chaymet, that the size of the chaymet is the size of a dash of a lentil beam, or like the tail of a lizard, which is the size of an adash of a lentil beam, and the tail of a lizard has a status of its own creepy crawly creature. Why? Explains Rashi beautifully, because after you cut off that tail, it still wiggles around, it still has some life to it. And we continue with our ayis. Now we go the Mishnah continues again that Arias has Sukkim written about him. It says about what do you mean? It's explicit. Loi nitzcha, as we turn over to Yud Aleph Amud Beis lebitay me'anu sasai d'loiksiva. If someone violates his daughter that was born out of wedlock, a daughter that was born from a relationship between him and a woman in which he forced to have relations, then he sleeps with that daughter, that is not explicit in the Torah, that level of incest, and that is what the Mishnah is referring to. Damarava Amrli Rav Yitzchak bar Avdimi Asin Heina Asi Zima Zima. It's a double Xer Shav. It's not explicit. Of course, it's forbidden. Of course, it is sourced. It is not explicit. And we continue that the Mishnah concluded that the last part of the Mishnah is Einin Gufei Torah. Tahani, says the Gemara in Hanach Loi, only these items are Gufei Torah, and other things, whether they're not so explicit or not Gufei Torah. How can you say such a statement? Eleim Hein Vein Gufei Torah. Rather, all of these, whether explicit or not, the level of explicitity in the Torah or not, they're all Gufei Torah. Hajan Alacha Kol Chayav, to a fascinating Chazara and a fabulous and incredible Chazara of his first parak of Chagigah, and now we have 2 prakim left. Incredible as we close in on the entirety of Seder Mayid. Who would have thought slightly more than 2 years ago that we'll be so close to be finishing Seder Mayid? I remind everyone who would like to participate, Meretz Hashem, we're going to be having a siyum. I think it's going to be on March 7th or 8th. I don't know, but I believe March 8th. Please reach out if anyone would like to participate. At the moment, it's going to be, I think, in Flatbush in New York. Whoever could come, whoever wants to participate, please reach out as we are closing in about 16 blot left, a little bit more than 2 weeks, 2 prakim left. Let's begin the next parak of Masechtas Chagigah. Says the Mishnah in Darshan Ba'arayis B'Shlish, you're not allowed to darshan, you're not allowed to give shir about a forbidden unions. B'shleisha with 3 people. V'loy b'ma'aseh b'reishis. B'shnayim, you're not allowed to darshan ma'aseh b'reishis with 2 people. V'lo b'merkava. You're not allowed to darshan about the ma'aseh merkava. B'yachad with 1 person. Elohim kain, unless hayachacham u'mevim midaitoi. Unless the person is a chacham, he's wise, a scholar, u'mevim midaitoi, understands on his own. Now, if anyone's thinking that sounds a bit contradictory, that we said you can't do it b'yachid unless that person knows everything, so what is it? If it's allowed to do b'yachid and he knows everything, what's going on? The Gemara will explain in one moment exactly what's going on. But now the Mishnah explains itself. Whoever looks at these 4 entities, it is fitting for him not to have been born into the world. One can never think what's above God, what's below the world, what's before the world, what's after the world. And anyone who has doesn't care about the honor of God, you're not worried about asking these questions. He's right not to have come to the world. And let's get to the Gemara that's going to begin explaining our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, the Mishnah says, don't darshan, don't give shir on what? Arayah is 3 people. Ma'aseh Bereishis, creation of the world, 2 people. Ma'aseh Merkava with 1 person. And then it says, unless that 1 person is, he understands understands on his own. So I don't get it. If he understands on his own and he could be the one to darshin, so then he shouldn't be allowed to learn it. So why are you telling me what exactly does the Mishnah mean? Explains the Gemara. Ain't darshin ba'arayis lishloisha. Don't darshin 2-3 people, two other people. The Rebbe should not teach it to one person. Unless the person you're teaching, he's wise and understands on his own. Meaning, in this simple reading of the Gemara, it sounds like there were 3 people in total. The Rebbe and 2 learning Arayis. The Rebbe and 1 learning Ma'aser Bereishis. And then big Yachid, sounds like you're learning on your own, and that is not allowed. The problem was, I don't get it, it's a contradiction. If you're not allowed to learn on your own, then what does it mean? So explains the Gemara, no, it means you're teaching it to 3, teaching it to 2, teaching it to 1, unless you can learn it. When you're allowed to teach it to 1, if that person is a high level understanding, the simplest reason is he's not going to ask inappropriate questions, he's going to be able to just absorb and learn. And we continue with Ein Darsha B'Arayis B'Shleisha, continues the Gemara. About 10 lines into the Gemara, you're not allowed to darshan Arayis b'shleisha ma'itayma. If it's because the pasuk says, each man should not come close to his relative. This one about Arayis, trey, sher b'sarai chad. So from the pasuk of Arayis, we see it's referring to 3 people. And therefore, we want to perhaps learn from there. That's the source that you cannot darshan Arayis to 3 people. Ask the Gemara that each man should not curse God. Each man should not worship his son to the Vazar Melech. Are you going to tell me the same thing, that this is only forbidden if you're doing it 2 people together serving the idol, 2 people together cursing God? Of course not. Rather, what does the pasuk mean? The pasuk shat elahanu mi ba'ilei. Rabbi says Anachim. So you know what these psukim are teaching you? These psukim are necessary to teach you to include a non-Jew. Shemizharim. Even a non-Jew is warned about. Al Berch Hashem. Israel. He's not allowed to curse God. He's not allowed to worship an idol like a Jew. And therefore, Hainami Mibaile, our pasuk of Ishish Shakol Sher B'Sarai is also needed. L'Rabbis Anachim. The Kaim as well are forbidden on certain Arayis, certain ancestral relationships. Shamuzarin al Arayis ki Israel. So we're back to square one. We don't have this pasuk of Ish teaching us like we just thought, and therefore says the Gemara, what is the source? You're not allowed to darshan Arayis to 3 people. In the first white line, Elam Midachsev, Ushmartem es Mishmarti. You should observe my safeguard. Shmartem is trey in the plural. Mishmarti is chad is 1. V'omer Achmana, and says the Torah Lebelti. And says the Torah, that you have to be careful that those are not involved in toyevos, in terrible things. So we're discussing 3 people, and 3 people together should not be involved in toyevos, and that is the source. You don't darshan Arayis to 3 people. Says the Gemara, 1 second. We find this wordage of ushmartem elsewhere in the Torah. Guard the Shabbos, ushmartem es ha-mitzvah. Excuse me, Shmartem es ha-matzos. Watch the matzos. Shmartem es mishmeres ha-kodesh, and watch the mishmeres ha-kodesh. Are you going to tell me, Ochanami? You're going to tell me that's only a din of 3 people? Of course not. Elam Ravashi, my ein darshan b'arayis b'shloisha, ein darshan b'sisrei arayis b'shloisha. Doesn't mean stam learning about arayis. It means the sisrei arayis, things which are not explicit, similar to what we learned. One prashat is like we learned on the top of the Amud, the case of Biti Me'anusasa, the case which are not explicit, that you should not do with 3 people. My taima, what's the reason? Svaru, says the Gemara, it's logical. Ki trey, when 2 people sit and learn from a Rebbe, what happens? One Talmud, one student is asking of the Rebbe, what's the other Talmud doing? Matzli, the other Talmud is what? Matzli Odnei Ligamara. He is listening. So in this two Talmidim, one discusses with the Rebbe and one listens. So therefore, we're not nervous anything's going to happen. But Lasa, what happens when there's three Talmidim, three students in front of a Rebbe? Chad Shakavatari, one asks of the Rebbe, Vadi Rabbi, Ve'anach Trey. What do the other two people do? Shak Levitari Vadi Adalti. They whisper, they talk amongst each other, and therefore, what's the problem? Aside from the chutzpah to the Rebbe, and they don't know what the Rebbe is saying. That's the concern. So it's a svara that when two people are learning from a Rebbe, they're both attentive. When there's three, one talks to the Rebbe, the other two talk amongst each other. All Rabbeim should take comfort that all the way back with Zman Chazal, we see these issues of the Talmidim talking amongst each other, but that is why you don't darshan arayis to three people. But ask the Gemara, why just arayis? We should be nervous anything. You're going to teach them what's going to happen. The two of them are going to be shmoozing, get the wrong halacha. Says the Gemara, arayis shiny damarmar gezel v'arayis nafsha mechamdasan misavelahem. The soul desires them, and one is a burning taiva, lustful inclination for them, and therefore there specifically you have to be careful that the Talmud is going to get the wrong halacha. What do you mean? You should be nervous like Gezel also. Explains the Gemara, Arayis bein befanav, bein shaloi befanav nafsha yitzrei. Arayis always has that burning desire, but Gezel, when the money's in front of you, then you got sticky fingers. Befanav nafesh yitzrei, shlo befanav lo nafesh yitzrei. That's why we have to be concerned more about Arayis. That's why you can't dash it to three people, because of the concern. One will talk to the Rabbi, two will have cross conversation. Now listen carefully. We'll pick it up from here in the next year. Amir Zashem.